A very warm good morning to my fellow students, teachers, and respected guests. I am Angita Jomon. Today, I am delighted to join with you all for the talk on mental health in post-pandemic world in connection with World Mental Health Day observation organized by the Department of Criminology and Police Science, St. Thomas College, Thrissur. Let us all begin this webinar with a silent prayer. I am profoundly joyous and honored to invite Dr. Shweta Thomas, Assistant Professor of Department of Criminology and Police Science for welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Angita. Good morning. Greetings to one and all. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to grace all of your presence for this program in connection with World Mental Health Day observation. It gives me tremendous contentment to be presenting the welcome speech. The topic for today is mental health in post-pandemic world. And to share his thoughts about mental health, today we have with us an eminent personality in the field of psychiatry, Dr. Suhas Satish. Dr. Satish has completed his MD in psychiatry and postdoctoral fellowship in clinical neurosciences and therapeutics in schizophrenia. His research interest areas include schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, community psychiatry, and psychotherapy. He is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry, NIMHANS, Bangalore. It is an honor for me to welcome Dr. Suhas on behalf of the Department of Criminology and Police Science for this program. Welcome, sir. St. Thomas family is blessed with a true leader who has the courage to make tough decisions and the compassion to listen to the need of others. Our leading guide, our Reverend Principal, Reverend Father Martin K.A. has joined us to inaugurate this program. On behalf of the Department of Criminology and Police Science, I extend a warm welcome to you, Father. A strong base is required to hold a building tall and strong. The very base of Department of Criminology and Police Science is Dr. Febin Baby, the head of the department. On behalf of all the organizing committee and participants of this function, I extend my warm-hearted welcome to Dr. Febin Baby. Welcome, sir. I also invite Dr. Father Sijon, Assistant Professor at the Department of Criminology and Police Science, for joining this program with keen interest to enhance his knowledge on mental health. With a grateful heart, I welcome Ms. Adira, Assistant Professor, Department of Criminology and Police Science, who has provided her valuable and sincere support in organizing this program. Welcome you to the program. I also extend my warm welcome to all the teaching staff from various other departments of St. Thomas College for joining this program. Finally, I invite all the students and welcome all the students from the Department of Criminology and Police Science, as well as all the participants from different universities in Kerala. I extend a warm welcome to you all. I ensure that all of you will thoroughly gain in-depth knowledge with today's session and definitely take some learning home today. Once again, welcome you all.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I feel honored to invite the backbone of Department of Criminology and Police Science, Dr. Febin Baby, for the presidential address.
Dear respected Principal Dr. Father Martin K., our chief guest of today's day observation, Dr. Suhas from NIMHANS, dear faculty members, vice principals, and our beloved teachers, participants, and students. It is actually a great pleasure to be with you all to introduce a new speaker who is actually very much, expert in the field of mental health, psychiatry, and all. We are actually facing a difficult era in the human life, or in the form of a pandemic. So it is actually very relevant to talk about the mental health, because most of the experts are keen to observe the mental health during the pandemic era. So I was actually planning to organize a webinar on this, but we fortunate to get a good faculty from NIMHANS, who's the pioneer in the mental health. So I hope this will be a great, session for the and it will be a informative session for all of you. I also would like to make a statement, or in the sense, it is okay to feel no, I mean, it is okay to feel abnormal. It is okay to feel discomfort. It is okay to feel depressed. But what we get from what we actually get in the form of a support is very much important. So it is not abnormal, but it's actually normal thing to feel discomfort. So we should have the help of an expert in the field of mental health to regain our normal. So hope this will be a great session for all the participants to regain the normal. So I wish all the success and all the support from the Department of Criminology for the great mental health for the entire community. Thank you so much.
I now invite the person who has consumed himself to change the society and light the darkness in the life of the students, our Honorable Principal, Reverend Father Martin K.A., who always supports and guides us in all our programs and activities. Father, I cordially invite you for inaugurating this talk.
A warm good morning to one and all. Dr. Suhas Satish, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychiatry, NIMHANS, Bangalore, the resource person of the day. Dr. Fabian Baby, the HOD, Dr. Shweda, other faculty members, vice principals, delegates, and my dear students. The World Health Organization has defined mental health as a condition of well-being where individuals understand own potential and deal with usual stress of life. Mental health issue is often referred to disorders usually distinguished by imbalance of mood, behavior, and thought. Such negative attitude towards this mental status should be changed. And when we analyze the history, we'll find that every disasters or long wars, especially World War First, World War Second, have followed with depression and so on. Both the financial and mental depressions have happened in the annals of history. So now we are passing through a similar situation. The whole world is involved, not only a part of the world or a country or a continent. The whole world is affected very badly by this deadly disease called COVID-19, and hence we expect a, an age of depression. So hence we should be both physically and mentally fit. And here we have a very resourceful and vibrant resource person, that is Dr. Suhas Satish. And to hear a talk from NIMHANS, the name itself stand for excellence, especially in the matters of mental health. So a professor from NIMHANS talking to us, it's a great opportunity for us, and it has caused because of this special situation called a pandemic. So we are able to have virtual classes, virtual talks, and I'm very happy that we have Dr. Suhas, and he will enlighten us on the topic mental health in post-pandemic world. Let us have a sound mind in a sound body. Wishing you all the best with all your permission. And I take also I take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of Criminology and Police Science for organizing such regular programs. And with all your permission, with these words, I declare this webinar being inaugurated. Have a great session ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father. Moving on to the most important part of the section, the talk on mental health in post-pandemic world. I now invite Dr. Suhas Sadish, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychiatry in NIMHANS.
Thank you. I hope that my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank St. Thomas Institution, Thrissur. The very name actually is an epitome of quality, and we all know that when we are actually coming and sharing some of our knowledge and resources from across two states, from NIMHANS to St. Thomas College, that we ought to kind of be thankful that we have been given this opportunity. I would also like to thank the Reverend Father for giving a very kind introduction and for also the kind words regarding NIMHANS. I also thank the Institute for dedicating an half-a-day program, albeit online, to this very important topic of mental health in a post-pandemic world. Now, without further ado, I want to talk about just three main things today with all of you. One is about COVID-19 and its impact on the mental health. I want to talk about the 9th step towards psychological well-being. And I'm going to touch upon a very important paradigm shift in our thinking when we talk about post-traumatic stress to a post-traumatic growth model. I hope that in the coming 20 to 25 minutes, I'll be able to engage you in this important talk and hopefully share some few important messages regarding mental health and well-being. We all know that the COVID-19 virus and the resultant pandemic has been devastating for the world, especially India, which has been at the receiving end of significant morbidity and mortality due to persons affected with COVID. In fact, we still are yet to uncover the long-term effects of COVID, called as long COVID-19, and what all it has in store for people who have recovered from this potentially deadly virus. We also know that COVID-19 directly and indirectly has in a way affected our near and dear ones with respect to our mental well-being. We know that new onset mental health issues such as stress has been ubiquitous ever since the onset of the pandemic. Also, there has been a significant increase in the rates of relapse of pre-existing mental health issues in persons during the pandemic period. We also know that this COVID-19 has been very, very unjust and has been very harsh on people from the lower socioeconomical strata, migrant laborers, disempowered and underprivileged sections of the society, so much so that it has pushed people into poverty, unemployment, and it has spiraled the rates of the crime, it has spiraled the rates of domestic abuse and violence, and it has led to so many cascading, devastating effects on mental health and well-being. We also know that directly and indirectly, COVID-19 has led to an increase in the rates of suicide, directly because of the fact that many people, because of the infodemic, having a lot of information and kind of not able to process it, and the fear and the paranoia that has struck them, many persons who are affected early on in the disease, we have read in the news, wherein they have actually died by suicide because they were not able to assimilate and accept the fact that they were affected with COVID-19. Indirectly because there has been so many countless number of people who have lost their livelihoods, who have lost their near and dear ones to COVID-19, that they are not able to assimilate that trauma and leading to them dying by suicide. COVID-19 has also caused a significant amount of grief, loss of meaning, and sense of coherence that was erstwhile there in persons all around the globe. We are also now increasingly noticing that people who are affected and recovered from the acute stage of the virus are showing some long-term neuropsychiatric sequelae, such as anxiety disorders, somatization disorders, and some neurocognitive disturbances. Now, having spoken about COVID-19, I want to touch upon an important aspect of World Mental Health Day 2021. The World Mental Health Day 2021 theme for this year, that is mental health in an unequal world. Now, this particular theme was chosen by the World Mental Health Global Awareness Campaign with cognizance of the fact that although we are rapidly advancing technologically, scientifically, economically at different parts of the globe, this particular growth has not been equal. This growth has not been kind to all sections of the society. So this year, the theme that was chosen was mental health in an unequal world, which aims to bring a bridge and to reduce the gap in access to mental health care so that there is less inequality in access to mental health care and mental well-being. It would be interesting to note that according to the National Mental Health Survey of 2016 and 17, which was conducted in India, close to 70 to 80% of the Indians do not have access to appropriate mental health care. In fact, let me rephrase that. Close to 80% of the Indians do not have access to any mental health care. Now, that's a very startling statistic, which means to say that only 1 in 5 persons who are in need of mental health services actually get any sort of mental health care at all. So therefore, it is highly important that we are actually taking all the efforts that are required to reduce this gap, especially given that COVID-19 has led to a worsening of this mental health gap due to an added psychological burden of illnesses, and also taken away the available healthcare resources which have been reallocated to meet the needs of the pandemic. It is interesting to note that the psychiatrists to the people with mental illness ratio and to the psychiatrists to the population ratio or psychologists to the population ratio is very abysmal in India. And we are projecting that in the coming 20 to 30 years, we still won't be reaching the targets that have been set by the Western institutions. So there has been efforts to increase the number of courses and the number of people taking up these courses. But again, it has led to inequality because most of the mental health practitioners who graduate out of these courses, that is, it might be MD in psychiatry, it might be MPhil in clinical psychology or psychiatric social work, most of them tend to be practicing in and around the cities. Now, this leads to a disparity between where there is a need, because 80 to 90% of the people in requirement of mental health care are in the rural areas, and 80 to 90% of the people who are trained are actually in the urban areas. This divide is because of many reasons. While we cannot get into the details of what we can immediately do to reduce this particular divide, I thought that this important forum can actually provide some tips about psychological well-being. Forum can provide some tips about being sensitive to the mental health issues that can arise during the pandemic, so that in case you pick up on at least 1 or 2 important messages during this presentation, you can always pass it on to your colleagues, near and dear ones, relatives, and friends and hopefully it will have a cascading effect of positivity in the area of mental health of people in and around us. On that note, I want to kind of reiterate about what is mental health according to WHO 2014. The World Health Organization has defined mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, and they can cope with the normal stressors of life, and they can work productively and fruitfully and able to make a contribution to their community. Now, if we look at the definition of mental health, which Reverend Father also highlighted, there are 4 components which are very important. Please give me 1 second. For the small interruption. As I was telling, that mental health definition involves 4 important constructs. One is it is not just the absence of an illness. We do not define mental health as absence of depression, absence of anxiety, absence of schizophrenia, but rather we call it as a state of well-being, wherein we recognize that we are actually well. We recognize that we are in a state of positive mental health. Second aspect of this particular definition is that each individual realizes their own potential. Now, this is also a very crucial construct to understand, because each individual is expected to be functional, to be productive according to their own potential and capabilities. Now, if you're in a state of positive well-being, an individual is actually much more likely to reach their potential and reach the goals and objectives that they have set for themselves. Naturally, World Health Organization also stresses upon the fact that stressors, ordinary stressors, are expected in life, such as life. Probably the most universal of all experiences is stress, because there cannot be an individual whom we can name, whom we can say that who has not faced stress at all in their life, because such is the nature of life. So an individual who has recognized that he's in a state of well-being, he or she is in a state of well-being, they realize their own potential, they can cope with the normal, ordinary stressors of life, and most importantly, they can work productively and fruitfully to make a contribution to their community. So it doesn't stop at the fact that the person actually has a state of well-being and they realize their own potential and cope with stress. But of course, that should translate to the greater well-being of the society, the greater well-being of the country, the greater well-being of the world, wherein we can help our fellow men and fellow women to actually uplift the states that we are living in and meaningfully contribute based on whatever potentials that we have set for ourselves. So, what happened to this particular definition once the COVID-19 pandemic set in? There is a very famous example that is given about the Buridan's ass paradox, wherein it's a donkey that is given an opportunity to have food and water, which are kept equidistant towards its right and towards its left. And the donkey, however, is equally thirsty and equally hungry. Buridan's ass paradox says that this particular donkey is unable to actually take effective decisions and is unable to decide whether it should go for the hay first or it should go for the water first, and therefore in the process prolongs the state of hunger and prolongs the state of thirst that it is experiencing. What we have realized increasingly in a post-pandemic world is it has led to a lot of information overload. Much of the information, what we call as the infodemic, has passed in through the social media, which has led to a lot of indecisiveness and uncertainty, leading people to actually be distressed about the fact that they're unable to take decisions regarding their health and their family's health. Now, this is not necessarily a mental illness per se, but probably the most commonly observed mental health issue in people whom we come across in our regular OPDs and in our interactions. Once we see that this particular analogy can be extended to involve distress regarding the anxieties about all the information that is coming through, then we need to also see as to ways to address them and ways to counter some of these distressing information, and also how do we actually ensure that people can take effective decisions to ensure that they are not caught in this paradox or loop. So we will go ahead and discuss the 9 steps to psychological well-being. Now, these are not great hidden secrets, and I'm sure that most of you would have read about this, heard about this, and in fact, I'm sure you're in your institutions as well. You would have had counselors and doctors or wellness experts coming and talk about most of these things. But I thought that these 9 basic steps are so essential that it is worth reiterating and repeating about them on this particular forum. So let me quickly run through these 9 steps of psychological well-being. Number 1, of course, we have to ensure that during the pandemic and in the post-pandemic period, we have to ensure that we get adequate sleep, because if a person is actually sleep deprived, let's say on an average, every person needs about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And if they are consistently sleep deprived, it can lead to exhaustion. Exhaustion can lead to a difficulty in managing the expected responsibilities and roles. And this can lead to feelings of inferiority and inadequacy. And this can lead to cascading effects on psychological well-being, which can also lead to a postponement of the goals and objectives that his or her organization has set, and leading to further sleep deprivation because of the worries about the same. And also the persons are going to try to meet those targets by extending those duration that they are awake. Now, this has worsened during the pandemic because of several reasons. We have seen that the pandemic has led to an disturbed biological rhythm. So, because of the fact that there was the lockdowns and people are working from homes, people are actually having a disturbed sleep-wake schedule. And also there is an increased use of substances like caffeine, stimulants, or alcohol, which can actually impact the quality of sleep and also disrupt the healthy rhythms that the body is tuned to before. Therefore, it is our recommendation that there is a limitation in the screen exposure after evening, and that there is a healthy amount of exercise, which I'll be talking about in the subsequent slides. There should be an effort to actually avoid alcohol and caffeine and stimulants before sleep, and there should be a decrease in the photic stimulation that the eyes and the body receives before sleep, so that the person's melanocyte receptors can actually respond to the inherent circadian rhythms and put the person to sleep. Secondly, of course, it cannot be stressed that we need to get regular exercise. It has been particularly challenging during the different phases of the pandemic. We now know that the physical health and the mental health are not two separate entities, what we call as the mind-body dualism. We now know that there is actually a huge interplay between the physical well-being and the psychological well-being. And therefore, it is important that we also focus on our physical well-being in the form of regular exercise. Now, what is recommended according to the World Health Organization is at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic physical exercise throughout the week. Now, this can be spread out during the week to fit the schedule. And of course, the virtual platform has given us an opportunity to ensure that despite the fact that we are not able to go out and physically engage ourselves in gymnasiums or take regular walks that we used to regularly take in parks, we can always do the moderate intensity exercises from the comforts of our home, thanks to a lot of virtual fitness experts who have come up on the social media. Next important aspect is to avoid alcohol and drugs. Needless to say, this particular positive health measure is always relevant, irrespective of whether we're talking about the pandemic or after the pandemic, or or when we talk about overall psychological well-being per se. This is because use of substances can lead to a negative cycle of dependence, wherein it can exacerbate the pre-existing mental health issues. And sometimes people tend to cope in negative ways by turning to substances, what we call as pseudo dependence, wherein instead of reaching out to a person who is a mental health professional, they reach out to substances to actually self-medicate. Now, we need to learn to avoid situations and people associated with cravings. We need to say no, develop assertiveness in saying no to things that are not good for our body and mind. And we need to also ensure that we don't give in to peer pressure. That is because many times drugs like alcohol or nicotine can become gateway drugs to other recreational substances, which can have far severe consequences on the physical and mental well-being. Next, we come to simple practice of meditation, pranayama, and yoga. We do not need to go into some depths of asanas and depths of practices of yoga. All we need to do is practice breathing exercises. And if yoga doesn't work for you, a simple Tai Chi will do. If Tai Chi doesn't work for you, just a simple progressive muscle relaxation will do. But it is increasingly noted that any sort of an effort to bring in the relaxation into the body will release positive endorphins, which will lead to an increased sense of well-being, and which will also lead to the reduction in the psychological distress and the prevalence of common mental disorders. COVID-19 has had a very devastating impact upon our social networking. It has had a very curtailing impact on the way we connected with people. In-person and physical conferences, in-person and physical family get-togethers, going out with friends had become a rarity, at least in the past 1 year or so. Thankfully, things have improved, and we are now increasingly able to step out of our houses, of our workplaces, and reconnect with people. It is important to note that we need to kind of invest in this social metric and be socially connected with each other, not only for the fact that it is a healthy way to spend time, but also because of the fact that a positive sense of well-being and a sense of belongingness in the community is something that has a very positive effect on the emotional well-being. There have been innumerable studies which have clearly documented that there is a significantly lesser proportion of mental health issues in societies in which the citizens felt well connected with each other. So how do we actually ensure that we are socially connected? Few simple strategies include developing good sharing and listening strategies, being kind and empathetic to the people around us, keeping regular connection with close friends and family, and even if we are not able to meet them in person, to have virtual conversations. And perhaps the most important kind of tip that we can actually imbibe with respect to improving social connectedness is having an agenda-less conversation, wherein when we meet our friends or colleagues or our families, to start off with some topic of interest. It might be current affairs, it might be about the world, it might be about anything, which doesn't have to be about anything quite really. And sometimes that can lead to a very positive experience in itself. We have to also give time in learning new skills, because we know that learning new skills is associated with improved sense of well-being, an improved sense of self-esteem, and a sense of purpose, because it comes up higher in the order of Maslow's hierarchy. Abraham Maslow, a pioneer psychologist, actually gave a hierarchy, a pyramid a structure, wherein he said that initially a human looks towards physiological needs like food, shelter, safety. Then comes the security and safety needs. Then comes the relationship needs. And then comes the higher order needs, which make a person realize to become self-actualized. Learning new skills during the pandemic, it doesn't have to be skills that can be put to economic gains, but these skills which can lead to an increased sense of well-being and give a sense of purpose can be both fun and also trigger pleasant emotions and promote overall well-being. Now, people might ask, okay, what is the new skill that I must learn and how do I go about it? And I'm sure most of you have come across online resources available that teaches a new language you wanted to always learn, a musical instrument you always wanted to pick up, a new kind of a craft you wanted to always pick up on, or a dancing sessions that you always wanted to attend. Now, you can actually choose whichever new skill that you want to actually learn about, but it is important to actually develop this particular hobby and a good investment of our time, because it can have a positive trigger on our overall well-being. Of course, it is very important to reduce the time that we are giving to social media and exposure to the virtual platforms, televisions, and news channels. We all know that all news channels essentially are business minded, at least most of them are, and this leads to a bombarding of all sorts of catastrophizing, fear filled information during the pandemic. Needless to say, there is, of course, very important information that is also shared through the news, and we must learn to filter out the good from the news that is actually leading to us feeling emotions of insecurity, us feeling emotions of inadequacy, us feeling threatened about our environment. So the way we can actually keep a tab on this is by first realizing that, is this a problem in our life? That can happen through putting time limits on the amount of time spent on our smartphone and mobile devices. And also, we can give time away from these virtual platforms towards more meaningful activities in our life, some of which we have already discussed. It is important to note that too much exposure to continuous information about the potential effects of the pandemic, about the overall damage that the pandemic has done, leads to a sense of unease and a disquiet, which can go deep into the subconscious mind and disrupt the sense of stability that existed before. So it is very important to limit the time that you have actually allotted in a day to these news channels. Also, as always, we recommend to view the news channels which are actually giving more information rather than catastrophization, and also, most importantly, to decrease the time spent on social media, because of one more reason. We live in a world wherein people like to post about all the good things that are happening to them. This has led to an unhealthy sense of social well-being that people want to portray, in which we see often youngsters and young adults who want to kind of put up on their Insta page, who want to put up on Twitter about every little thing that they do in their life. But we have seen that can have a deleterious impact on vulnerable individuals who often get into the spiraling effects of envy, who get into spiraling effects of a negative body image, and also lose confidence in themselves when they look at all the things that others are doing. Therefore, it is important not only for the sake of avoiding catastrophizing information in the media, but also for our mental stability to avoid the social media platforms, to ensure that we are not susceptible to the ill effects of the same. This is something that has been stated for a very long time now. We need to ensure that we eat a balanced diet, and we need to ensure that, especially being Indians, we know that we are susceptible for the metabolic syndrome, and it is important that we give importance to a healthy food, because increasingly we are noticing that a diet which is low in carbohydrates, which is rich in protein, and which is also moderate in fat amount, leads to positive well-being, so much so that the newer diets of low carb diet have been tried in a few mental illnesses. Now, if it is that effective, making small changes in our diet by avoiding simple sugars, decreasing the quantity of caffeine and use of milk products can have a positive influence in our life. Lastly, we need to connect with nature, because we need to realize that the climate change and the environmental change is having an effect on our urbanized life. So spending time in the natural environment reduces depression and anxiety. In a European country and the Scandinavian countries, they have done studies in which they have put children who are suffering from oppositional defiant disorders and attention deficit hyperactivity disorders in a green environment in the midst of nature, and found out that their behavioral problems go down several fold. Now, this happen even without any psychological intervention per se, without any active counseling, without any active intervention in the form of medications. So connecting with nature can also lead to a sense of achievement, especially if you are having a personal garden of your own, reduction in stress and negative feelings, and sense of connectedness and the self-confidence that can pervade into other areas of life and give you a motivation and a purpose at home as well. After having covered these 9 important but simple steps which we are all aware of, I want to actually talk about the lives approach. We need to realize that knowing all this information might be very simple for us, but it is important that while it might not directly be relevant to us because we might not be going through mental health issues, we can help someone who is going through mental health issues. We now know that stigma still has a very important role to play in our society, wherein people do not turn up to mental health professionals and take help with respect to their mental health needs. Therefore, the way to help people who are in need of psychological resources is through peer-led programs, lay counselors, and through helping the near and dear ones who are in and around our lives. So the lives approach is a very simple strategy which all of us can actually imbibe. L stands for listen, wherein we listen to the people around us with empathy and without judging. I stands for inquiring about their needs and concerns, especially we talk about their emotional, physical, social, and practical needs. V stand for validating, wherein we just tell them that we understand that they are going through a tough time and that they are not to be blamed. It's a very important point to be noted, isn't it? Which was actually alluded to at the beginning of this particular program, wherein we talked about how it is okay not to be okay. But then for the person who is going through the distress, if they hear it from someone else that it is okay not to be okay, that itself can have such a positive effect on their distress. We also need to enhance safety, especially if they are at a place wherein they can harm themselves or they can be at a risk of harm from others. And we need to support them by providing access to information, services, and social support that is available in the local environment. So this lives approach or lives approach can actually kind of help all of us to ensure that we provide the basic amount of care that is needed for a person in distress. This can also help reduce the gap that is there in the utilization of mental health services, especially considering that mental health professionals cannot percolate to all areas of India. So when do we recognize that there are red flag signs wherein somebody needs to be brought to a mental health professional? The red flag signs include persistent appetite changes, persistent agitated or aggressive behavior, a significantly low mood filled with helplessness, hopelessness, or worthlessness, a significant decrease in the socialization behavior, extreme difficulty in concentrating, or persistent difficulty in sleeping. If you notice any of these symptoms in your near and dear ones, we strongly urge that you can visit your nearest mental health service provider. If you want to go to a psychiatrist, that is fine. Or if you can get access to a nearby mental health counselor, that is also fine. We do not need to wait till someone worsens to a state wherein they need to be hospitalized for us to help them. Simple strategies as recognizing these signs early and patching them through to the places of help where help is available can actually go a long way in helping people in need. Now coming to the post-pandemic stress disorder. The topic for the day was mental well-being in a post-pandemic world, or mental health in a post-pandemic world. Now we know that after the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a significant increase in stress disorders that is there in the population. This actually resembles what is called as the post-traumatic stress disorder that is seen usually in persons who undergo significant trauma. We see that people are having difficulty in relaxing. They're having persistent arousal, anxiety, and hypervigilance, wherein each and every stimulus is associated with a fear that it could lead to something negative, that it could lead to something bad happening. People have difficulty in trusting information. They have difficulty in trusting people. And they are having decreased and sleep and disturbed biological functions, leading to them not being able to be at their productive best. Also, increasingly, as the COVID-19 pandemic is being controlled, we now realize that after 2 years of working from home, especially in the case of IT professionals, after 2 years of staying at home for children, they are actually fearing normalcy, wherein they do not know whether they'll be able to cope up with going back to the places of work, whether they'll be able to kind of trust the environment such that they're not vulnerable to this COVID, especially given that we do not know about the long-term efficacy of the vaccines that we have all received. So it is therefore essential for us to recognize that we do not need to be mentally ill to be suffering from some of the symptoms of this post-pandemic stress disorder. So one of the remedies that we have been kind of propagating and we have been talking about is having a paradigm shift in the way we look at this particular stress disorder. Stress, ladies and gentlemen, can lead to a whole lot of changes in our body, mind. So we all know that our body is in a state of homeostasis, and stress can disrupt this particular homeostasis. And whenever there is stress, our body tends to come back to a state of a new homeostasis. Now, this has been the original model of trauma, wherein they say that after trauma, there is a new equilibrium that is reached. And if there is repetitive trauma, there is new equilibriums that is reached, which are unhealthy in nature. So from a model wherein we were talking about homeostatic coping, wherein the body is reaching unhealthy equilibriums through compromise of psychological well-being, we are now looking at stress and saying that what we can actually learn from this and how will it lead to a positive change in our lives. So this is wherein we have talked about the transformational aspect of stress, wherein we say that instead of thinking about this particular COVID-19 pandemic as something that took away 2 years of our lives, we can actually need to see it as a transformational event that has happened in our lives. And we can actually kind of rewrite some of the thoughts and some of the equations that we had written about this COVID in our minds to lead to positive coping. So when we say post-traumatic growth, what we mean by it is that we need to ensure that instead of focusing more and more about the devastating impact of COVID-19 and the loss that it has actually had on our lives directly or indirectly, we need to recognize the new possibilities that are there in our lives right now, have a greater appreciation of the fact that we've all been through the probably the worst pandemic to affect mankind in the past, say, 100 years, and also ensure that the altered priorities that are there in our lives are actually kind of focused on the most important ones. That includes our families, our societies, and our near and dear ones. We also have realized that this post-traumatic growth model involves having more closer interpersonal confiding relationships, which can, of course, over a period of time lead to a greater sense of personal strength. Now, all of this can lead to what is called as a post-traumatic growth instead of a post-traumatic stress, which I'm sure that over a period of time, if we start imbibing some of these tips, we can actually kind of reach. Probably the most important superpower to have in this current day is tolerance of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty has become the new norm. We were used to staying in a world where everything was certain. We used to go to our colleges, we used to go to our hospitals, we used to go to our work, go back to our homes. Everything was actually set. The Indian Premier League started on time. We used to sit and look at the soap operas that were coming on television, and everything happened according to time. But what pandemic has actually kind of led to a condition wherein there was nothing certain anymore about life. There was a period, I'm sure all of you remember, wherein we did not know when the vaccines would come. We did not know when we would be eligible to receive them and if they would work, and when the second wave of the deadly coronavirus pandemic would come down. So tolerating uncertainty is actually a new superpower, and this doesn't come easy. So how do we actually encourage and imbibe qualities which can develop to an improved tolerance of uncertainty? One is by having an positive regard for people in and around our lives. If suppose our colleagues breach a deadline which they're supposed to meet, we can be a bit more easy on them. We can assume their positive intent and say that they're trying to do their best. We can recognize the good that the other people are doing, and we can also see that their lives are also disrupted, and therefore sometimes when we perceive hurt or harm from others, it might be as a result of altered communication styles through the difficulties that they are facing. Keep telling to ourselves that we have come a long way since the past couple of years and things will normalize again, and develop a new thinking wherein we say we are radically accepting of this uncertainty, wherein we say that that's okay. My mind gets a lot of thoughts about what can happen, what cannot happen, what should happen, but that's okay. It's a job of my mind to come up with these thoughts, and I need to tell a particular phrase to myself wherein I tell all the thoughts that are coming to my mind are not facts. So accepting the idea that everything is not within our control is okay. So if spirituality helps for you, all the well. So you can go and you can actually kind of, take spiritual help and say that, okay, I'm going to let go of the idea that I am in control, and I'm going to kind of ask God to be in control of my situation and my life, so that it leads to a greater sense of well-being. If you do not believe in spiritual superpowers, then you can also kind of put a positive angle to it by telling yourself that there is no end to the amount of thoughts, to the amount of uncertain thoughts that can come to your mind about this particular pandemic and what all possibilities that can happen as a result of it. So by telling yourself that this particular thoughts are expected, that your mind is not some computer machine which can be programmed to not have a particular pattern of thoughts, to accept that the job of the mind is like a factory wherein it produces some of these uncertain thoughts, and to actually kind of let go of it by telling that that's okay. That's the job of the mind to be having all these thoughts. I am not going to be worrying from it. Now, what it does is it is going to distance yourself from the catastrophizing thoughts, and therefore an idea that started off as, oh my God, I am a threat, anything can happen to me, I can actually kind of get COVID, I can be in a hospital, I can get black fungus, so on and so forth. You now realize that my mind is having these thoughts that there can be a possibility that I can be hospitalized or I can get whatever it is, but that's just the mind kind of overthinking it. So you cognitively distance yourself from your thoughts, and therefore you are letting the healthier aspects of your mind to take control. Doing this will result to an improved tolerance of uncertainty, which really is the new superpower in the current times. Social re-engagement and closer interpersonal relationships are very important. The picture depicted here is a culture-bound syndrome that is present in Japan called as hikikomori, wherein we see young adults and adolescents and children actually being increasingly reclusive, who stay in their homes or apartments, who prefer not to go out, who order online, who spend time more on gadgets, and who become social recluses thereafter. Now, this particular culture-bound phenomenon has baffled us because there is apparently no reason why they should be doing that. These are people who do not have an axis 1 disorder like depression, anxiety, psychosis, but still they are choosing to do so. Now, it is our fear, being mental health professionals, that the COVID-19 might lead to more and more of such behaviors being emulated in our country or even worldwide. So it is therefore very important that we take proactive steps to ensure that we are socially re-engaging with our colleagues, with our teachers, with our friends, relatives. Ensure that you make time for that family trip that you are taking after a long time. Ensure that you make time at least on a virtual platform when you are meeting with your friends, because that is very important, because we are also unlearning the art of reclusiveness and relearning the art of social re-engagement. We also need to keep in mind that we need to have an altered priorities for our life, because we need to review our life goals. Obviously, all of us would have had different strategies regarding what we need to do about our life, what we need to do about our life in the past couple of years, but which has not led to exactly the way we have planned. But it is important to note that we need to take it easy on ourselves, ensure that we tell ourselves that the pandemic does not equate to productivity, and ensure that our sense of personal mastery should not be based on what others are achieving, but rather a paradigm shift from the goal-oriented approach, from what we say that we need to achieve this, to a more systems-oriented approach, wherein we draw a hierarchy of where we want to be on the Cantrell's ladder, wherein the Cantrell's ladder talks about the best possible life that we can have, the worst possible life that we can have, and we need to be thankful that we are not at the bottom rung of the ladder. And even if we are, we need to be thankful that we are going to actually, the only way to go up the ladder. And we also need to ensure that we take these positive small steps that can result in an improved sense of well-being towards the life goals that we have set. I'm coming towards the last couple of slides. We need to ensure also that we are more realistic and pragmatic in our goals that we have set for ourselves. So these goals should not be based on a waterfall model. Now, these terms are used actually in engineering and computing terms, wherein we should not actually kind of look at it as a unidimensional construct wherein we define a requirement or a problem and then implement a strategy after that. We need to be more agile in our problem-solving strategies, wherein we look at the requirements, we plan, we design, and we develop based on a continuous feedback loop, and have these small, high-functioning collaborative teamwork that can lead to improved productivity and realization of our goals. Friends, lastly, I want to say that through all the strategies that we have discussed, we can actually feel more valued, have healthy relationships, we can adapt to change, we can improve our confidence, and lead a more balanced life to contribute to the community. On that note, I want to thank St. Thomas College, Thrissur again for this opportunity. I want to thank the Telemedicine and the Community Psychiatry Unit at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. And I want to thank the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, and the Armed Force Medical College. during who have actually helped us to actually formulate some of these strategies that can help us deal with the mental health issues during and after the pandemic. On that note, I end my presentation and I hand over the platform to the organizers.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable thoughts on mental health. Due to lack of time, the questions will be forwarded to sir and will be answered later.
Sure.
I now invite Adira Teresa for the vote of thanks.
Good morning. I hope I'm audible and visible, and thank you, Ankita. Okay, good morning, all. I deemed it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this great occasion. Let me start by giving glory to the Almighty God. First and foremost, on behalf of Department of Criminology and Police Science, St. Thomas College, Thrissur, I thank our special guest, Dr. Suhas Satish, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychiatry, NIMHANS, Bangalore, who despite his busy schedule, found time to grace this occasion. Thank you so much, Dr. Suhas. Okay, we are truly honored and grateful to the department for having such a great person of interest as a guest speaker for today, and thank you. We are always thankful to Reverend Father Martin K., the guiding light and principal, St. Thomas College, Thrissur, for his stewardship, support, vision, and commitment for making this talk a successful one. Thank you so much, Father. I also extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Fabian Baby, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of Criminology, for his valuable contribution, guidance, encouragement in all the endeavors of our department. Thank you so much, Dr. Fabian. I also have special gratitude to Dr. Shweta Thomas, Assistant Professor, Department of Criminology, for her unstinted support and hard work throughout. Thank you, Dr. Shweta. I also felt my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all the distinguished invitees who accepted our invitation and participated in this special talk. I also thank all other teaching staff of the Department of Criminology and other departments of St. Thomas College. It's because of you and your cooperation we are able to do this in a successful way. And thank you for the cooperation and support in all the programs conducted by the department. Thank you so much. Last but not the least, I thank our DERA students for their cooperation in making this event a resounding success. So once again, thank you all. Stay safe and take care and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.